Today is January 18th, 1958, and we are in the home of Mr. Frank Palmer of North Hudson, New York. I'm Arthur L. Benson of North Hudson, New York. May I have your name, please?
Well, I'm Frank Palmer of North Hudson, New York.
And I am Chester Mills of Schoon Lake, New York.
I am Mrs. Frank Palmer of North Hudson, New York.
I am William Jensen of Severance, New York.
Thank you. Mr. Palmer, it's a pleasure to be here this morning. How are you today?
Fine. I'm fine, sir.
I came by here the other day and saw you cutting wood. Do you cut all your own firewood?
Oh, yes, I cut my own firewood and do all my own farming.
How old are you, Mr. Palmer?
I was 82 years old the 25th day of last November.
Well, it's certainly wonderful to find you in such good health. I have a statement here that was made by you on January 4th. I'd like to read it and ask you a few questions about it, if it's all right with you.
Go right ahead with it.
It says about 50 years, January 4th, 1958. About 50 years ago, when the Champlain and Sanford Railroad was in the process of taking some of my land in North Hudson, New York by condemnation, they claimed that they were going to use it for a public railroad and that construction was to begin promptly. When years had gone by and they had not even started, I was convinced that they were not going to build the railroad, so I took over the former railroad strip in Lot 25, tract west of Road Patent, and in the north half of Lot 21 Road Patent, kept it fenced in with my other land, exercised my rights of ownership over it, and continued to use it as my very own for grazing, lumbering, and so forth for about 40 years until I recently sold my North Hudson property. In all that time, I heard nothing more about the railroad, and no one ever made any claim against my possession. It's signed by Frank Palmer. You remember signing this, Mr.
Oh, yes, I remember signing it.
And the notary is Mary Ward of North Hudson, witnesses Jack Ward and Mrs. Palmer.
Yes, I remember it.
Thank you. I'd like to ask just a few questions. You mentioned they were condemning your land. What was your objection to the railroad, Mr. Palmer?
Well, spring, I had our water supply comes through from the north end of Lot 21, and I was sure it was going to damage my spring.
In what way could it be damaged?
By blasting and other work on road.
I see. Was this railroad something you weren't particularly interested in the railroad?
Well, there was no, I wasn't. It was just a private.
Who wanted it?
Just a private concern, the ore company from Tahoe, New York.
I see. They called it a public railroad, but really was mostly for the mine. Is that the idea? Carry the ore out?
I'm sure that's what it was for.
Mm-hmm. I see you finally, according to the record, you finally let them have strip through your land. How was that?
Well, they were going to take it anyway, and the only thing I could do was to let them have it. And I wasn't in possession to have a lawsuit with any such company as that.
Oh, I see. So they were going to take it anyway.
They were going to take it anyway.
They said they were going to start promptly, according to your statement. Is that right, what they told you?
Oh, yes.
Uh-huh. Now, you say you took over the former railroad strip. About what time was that? Do you remember?
Why, 1916, I bought Lot 21-5 of Don Carson, and I was sure at that time there was nothing to be done with the railroad.
I've seen that deed, and as I recall, it accepts the railroad and doesn't allow you any right to cross. Weren't you worried about that?
No, I didn't feel that there was anything at all concerned with the railroad.
You felt the railroad was dead by that time?
As far as the railroad is concerned, I was sure it was dead.
So you just, what did you do? You just took
the lot, bought the lot, and used it as my very own, the whole of it.
I see. It says you kept it fenced in. Is that correct?
Oh, you kept it fenced in and grazed it, and also cut timber off from it.
Uh-huh. You exercise your rights of ownership?
Just the same as the rest of my own property.
I see. Well, that's very interesting. It says you had it for about, you used it for about 40 years, so you sold all your property here a short time ago. Is that
That's
correct?
right.
Now it says in all that time you heard nothing more about the railroad, and no one ever made any claim against my possession. You heard nothing about the railroad and all that?
No, I didn't hear a thing about no railroad.
Do I understand you correctly then? From the time you finally let them have what they were going to take anyway, you never heard anything more about the railroad up to the time you sold your North Hudson property?
No, I never did.
And no one ever made any claim against your possession?
No, sir. No one ever made any complaint.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate your letting us come here and getting further light on this statement, and you've been very kind. Thank you very much. Today is January 18th, 1958, and we are in the home of Mr. Frank Palmer of North Hudson, New York. I'm Arthur L. Benson of North Hudson, New York. May I have your name, please?
I'm Frank Palmer of North Hudson, New York.
I'm Chester Mills of Schoon Lake, New York.
I'm Mrs. Frank Palmer of North Hudson, New York.
I'm William Jensen of Severance, New York.
Mr. Palmer, how are you feeling today?
Fine. Good, very good.
I came by the other day and saw you at work. Do you take care of the farm here yourself?
Oh, yes. I do my own farming and cut my own wood.
How old are you, Mr. Palmer?
I was 82 the 25th of last November.
Well, it's wonderful to find you in such good health. I have in my hand a statement that was made by you with your permission I would like to read.
Go ahead.
It's dated January 4th, 1958. It's addressed to whom it may concern. You say the only right the National Lead Company got from me was to run a power line across the land I formerly owned in Lot 21 Road Patent and Lot 25 Tract West of Road Patent. Signed, Frank Palmer. The notary is Mrs. Mary Ward of North Hudson. The witnesses are Jack Ward and Mrs. Palmer. Do you remember this, Mrs. Palmer?
Yes, I do.
Frank, I'd just like to get a little further light on this arrangement you had with the National Lead Company about that power line. You say the only right they got from you was to run a power line. Is that correct?
That's right.
What did they tell you when they came here?
They said they wanted to run the power line to the Hawes.
Well, what's up at the Hawes?
For the ironworks.
Oh, the mines up there.
The mines.
I see. And just what permission did you give them?
I gave them right to put the power line in, nothing else.
That's all?
That's all.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Palmer.
You're welcome.
We'll listen to right on now without starting the camera. I'm going to talk about the deed this time. So I'll just let silence for a minute so I can cut the film. Today is January 18th, 1958, and we are in the home of Mr. Frank Palmer of North Hudson, New York. I'm Arthur L. Benson of North Hudson, and may I have your name, please?
I'm Frank Palmer of North Hudson, New York.
Your name?
I'm Chester Mills of Schoon Lake, New York.
I'm Mrs. Frank Palmer of North Hudson, New York.
I'm William Jensen of Severance, New York.
Thank you. Mr. Palmer, I have in my hand a statement that was made by you. With your permission, I'd like to read it.
Go ahead.
It's dated January 4th, 1958, and addressed to whom it may concern. You say, the only right the National Lead Company got from me was to run a power line across the land I formerly owned in Lot 21 Road Patent and Lot 25 Tract West of Road Patent. Signed, Frank Palmer. The notary is Mary Ward of North Hudson, and witnesses are Jack Ward and Albany Palmer. Is that you, Mrs. Palmer?
That's right.
You remember this, signing this statement? Thank you. Frank, I'd just like to ask you a little bit about this arrangement you had with the National Lead Company. Just what permission did you give them?
I didn't give them any permission except to build a power line.
That's all?
That's all.
Now, I think I've seen a deed from you to them, which deeded the property to them. Did you know about that?
Well, I had a paper. They had a paper, but I didn't go to any lawyers to find out just what it was.
I see. But will you repeat again just what it was you gave them permission to do?
I just gave them permission to build a power line.
And anything more?
Nothing more.
Oh, thank you very much.